Well, let's get started. Welcome. This is the Facilitating Change course, lecture number 1. It is a lovely May afternoon here in Finland, and I guess, well, let's start with that. Why don't you put in the chat, where are you from? Exotic places around the world. Sometimes we have people from Tampere, for example,
or Turku.
Just the Turku. The current record has been, we have people from Namibia last year, and then we have people from Mexico as well. So let's see how far we get this time. And at least a lot of you have registered. We're close to 300 people. This is the names that, or the little categories that you probably are familiar with. So 84 of you are from FITEC, 78 are you actual Aalto degree students, and most of you are so-called tourists. So welcome to hop on and hop off these lectures for the next 5-6 weeks that we're going to be here. So amazing crowd as well. We know a little bit where you come from and what you are, but let's get back to that. So what we got here, we got Poland, nice. Exotic Turku was mentioned again.
Yeah.
Germany, Munich. What do we got? Oulu, Liaksa, there we go. Kortesjärvi. We need to come back to this later. France. Okay, let's check if this course is for you. So this is kind of what Jari and myself, going to introduce ourselves briefly, don't worry. What this course is about is really, I guess you're here because you want to learn something about organizational change or change leadership, facilitating change and all that. So kind of typical categories that have enjoyed this course previously. If you're a team leader, you see yourself some kind of a change agent in the organization. Maybe you are even formally a leader or so forth, but maybe you're just a professional and you want to change things around you, change the world for the better. But anyway, pretty much anyone who wants to change the organization. So this course is very much focusing on that change happens typically within an organization. So that's the context. But it can be small change, can be big change, can be huge societal change. Kind of maybe the principles work for all of these levels. And it can be you as a team member in a company, large organization, small organization, or a work community. But we're hoping that this course will give you some ideas for this. If you want to change, how to do that. More formally, the course objectives is we're hoping to change your thinking about leadership, organizations, and how do you actually facilitate change with other people, i.e. organizations. And how all of this kind of changing organizations is actually very practical. We're not going to be very theoretical. We are going to be theoretical, but not mostly. Very repetitive. So things are over and over and over again, and it can get quite personal if you're taking it personally, that you're putting yourself into the change and the leadership. But mostly is that last line there is that hey, this is not really, mostly not book knowledge. We have some references and more readings at the end of each lecture, but it's really more like a practical course, and that's what we're hoping to bring into these lectures as well. So who am I? So my name is Risto. Very nice to meet you. I'm a university lecturer here at Aalto University in Finland, and I do a lot of executive coaching for companies as well. I've been doing that for over a decade now. And when it comes to transformations, I think I have led at least 3 major transformations in my career. I've been coaching and consulting large organizations in their transformations. And then again, I've done a lot of projects in my career, which are, again, transformations when you're doing innovation projects in companies and so forth and so forth. Talked about these topics, I've written a couple of books about them, and we have run this course with Jari at least for, was it the 5th year already or something like that? So,
yeah, I guess.
Anyway, Jari, who are you after all these years? Can you please tell me and the audience?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a more seasoned person, but being a while around these topics like leadership development, and so forth. My actual role at the moment is that I'm a lecturer also in Tuta department, and I'm heading one of the majors, organizational design and leadership, and also responsible for education of department is in a role of vice head. But so my keen interest have always been understanding leadership, maybe from more critical perspectives, but also leadership development. So I have also served not just here in academia, but being in quite many projects in real companies and in various roles in chains. And this has been a great pleasure to be a co-teacher here in this course with Risto. And so we want to provide you with a great experience, but that's also depending on you as well. But thanks for coming, and great to start.
Yes, absolutely. Nice to, and we have actually from the course personnel, the key people, 2 more people are Annika and Jaakko, who are our teaching assistants. And Annika is here today, pulling the strings behind the curtain. Annika, do you want to say hi? That's Annika saying hi. And yeah, and then there's the email that is going to answer all your problems, or at least we're trying to answer all your problems, because you come from very different places, and not all of you are degree students, and not not all of you are students at the university formally. So we try to keep things simple. So that's the email. Email is the #1 communication way here. And we're using Google Drive for simplicity, that everybody has more or less an access to a Google Drive folder. So we're not using the university systems because that would require usernames and all of these, a little bit of administrative hassle. But we'll figure it out. We try to keep things simple. And Annika's here already for the 2nd year, so she knows how to run the show. And then a little bit about the expectations in this course, because this is actually a very short course. We have only 6 lectures, but we could, cover many aspects of organizational change and leadership, and it's a rich topic. So a little bit about what did you sign up for. We're going to be, like I said, less like this. We're not going to give Jari and myself, we're not going to give you all the books and academic papers and research and talk about them. And it was also our attitude, just what Jari said earlier. We don't think that change leadership is book knowledge. We think that, yes, book knowledge matters, but actually it's more like a practical thing. It's more like a craft, if you will, or a skill. So less like this and maybe more like this. That we're trying to, that here's the setup, here are the typical challenges, here are probably the root causes why you want to change the organization. But you have to go and play the game yourself, Of course, we don't have the answers for your particular situations, but we can kind of maybe coach you and maybe give you kind of ideas that maybe you should be watching out for this or that and take that into consideration. The other thing to kind of expectations, we use the word leadership quite often here, but I think at least we like to think that we're kind of progressive when it comes to the concept of leadership, thinking that we don't think that leadership is a formal position in an organization. We think that, anybody can and should and does show leadership in what they do. Leadership as in people will follow you, people will listen to you, no matter where you are in a hierarchy or in an organizational chart. So it's for when we talk about leadership, it's not really about how many people report to you. When we talk about leadership, it's kind of like what Jari already implied, like this course is that there's Jari and me, we're running the show with Annika and Jaakko, but we actually are depending quite a lot on you to participate, on you to be active as well. So it takes 2 to tango in a sense, and that's about leadership. Leadership is not about the one leader, but it's actually a group of people kind of agreeing that, okay, this person might be the leader, but it requires everybody to work for the same leadership philosophy. So the next point being that there's no single mold. Everybody has their own leadership styles, their different fashions, different contexts require different kind of leadership. And of course, it changes as you change. Maybe you become older, maybe you become younger, maybe you become wiser, whatever. Your leadership should be dynamic and fluent depending on the context and the experiences you gather. That was a mini lecture about leadership now, wasn't it? And maybe we're hoping that we don't have all the answers. And actually, many of you have a lot of experience because you come from work life. And could be that you have more experience than we do on some topics. And that's probably true. But more like kind of like we are hoping that we're like your personal trainer, like I mentioned earlier. that this course is actually like, it's actually about you. It's kind of helping you to become a better change leader or finding new angles in your skills and trainings. And it's a lot about action. It's about doing things. It's like doing push-ups in that picture. It's not so much about books, like I said. And we believe that kind of this course is giving like a good core, just like in physical training, the kind of the basic muscles that you should be aware of and maybe, exercise daily when it comes to certain type of leadership. And it is continuous maintenance as well. I think we've had at least one occasion that somebody came back after 2 years and took this course again because they were like, hey, I need to kind of upkeep and maintain my thinking. So why not take this course and listen to the lectures again? And let's see. So,
Yeah,
and kind of, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Jari.
If I just add that this if you go back to the previous slide, that this is really an area where we are never kind of complete already. That is how we learn to be continuously reflective, and every now and then when we act, we also reflect, and then we take those moments of checking how are we doing and what are our hypotheses, and when we try something, then we also have to check how did it go. And as Risto already said, that leadership is much more happening in relationships. So we could also argue that we can't really do not much alone to be a good leader. It's always the others who decide what kind of impact we make, and it's always that we are all partakers to leadership process.
Yeah, it would be now funny that if it was, me alone in my garage doing leadership, it doesn't really matter if there's no other people here. So definitely, I think it's obvious when somebody says it aloud that leadership is actually a team effort, even though somebody is the leader in a sense that it might be a single person, but it requires the others.
And it's also highly contextual. So as Risto has mentioned, that it's within the context, it depends on the culture and the requirements, but also in situational things that how we build that collective process together. So it's always that.
Good. Yeah, I noticed the chat. It was Hanna was asking, are we going to go over the ADKAR change model? Well, we'll see. We're coming up. But that's, I can just comment tells you there's so many directions to take this course. But I think we're going to look at some of the classical models and a few words about them as well. But still about this course is kind of this picture is showing that's kind of step by step. The exercises we're asking you to do will kind of build on each other. So there's kind of a continuous thing that after doing all the exercises, the ones of you who are doing the exercises, then they're kind of building on top of each other, and hopefully there might be some relevation in the end. Yeah, so there's going to be the weekly pair exercises, and Annika and Jaakko are going to pair you up. So you probably were trying to get that there's an Aalto degree student, and then there's a FITEC professional, and we're going to try to make pairs of you each other. And the tourists, well, sorry, you don't get the exercise pairing, but you can do the exercises if you want. And then as a third point, we got suggested further readings if you are really interested in some of the topics that we covered here. So this is another way of saying and setting the expectations. It's kind of theory, practice, and it's really about trying to actually not telling you what are the answers, but trying to make you think. And that's why we need you to be actively listening and thinking and making everything we talk in your own context and applying it as much as you can do yourself. And kind of maybe having this dualism as well, that how do you think about things like leadership, how you think about organizations, how you think about change, and how do you actually make that into action? What do you actually do? So I think it's worth kind of having these dualistic approaches. How do I think about this? But nothing happens unless you do things. So that's why I'm again highlighting the practicality and the action in this course. And then again, just saying the obvious that, hey, you change. And remembering that when it comes to leadership and facilitation and everything, that context change, just what Jari, you said, it's very contextual, what kind of leadership works in different situations, what kind of change, what is change in different situations. And then as we know, in the year 2025, the world changes and it can change quite rapidly. So things need to adapt all the time. So it kind of becomes this continuous loop of what do I think, what do I do? And when I do things, think, do, think, do. So we're going to be talking about values, attitudes, and meanings. That's the thinking part. And we're going to be talking about tools, processes, ways of working. And that's more about the actual doing part and highlighting both of them. And let's try, one of the objectives is we're trying our best for you to get to know each other's, kind of leveraging the experiences you have. And that's the point of the exercise, is that we're going to put you together and, listen to the other people, what kind of experiences they have, what kind of thoughts, what kind of thinking they have, and so forth. Because you are an exceptional crowd, especially now that we're kind of blending you students with people who might have long careers as professionals, and kind of seeing what happens. And the exercises we're going to make you do, we're kind of forcing you to listen to the other person, trying to understand their perspective as well. So we're saying this aloud up front, that, hey, there's a lot of listening we're asking you to do. And then we are providing you with materials and links of taking these things further. So we're kind of hoping that maybe even after the lecture, you can start applying these things in your real job. Here are the lectures and the dates. I circled the 19th of May because that's a Monday. Because of Finnish holiday student schedules, we actually started only now. The actual study period started already 2-3 weeks ago. But that means we need to have 1 week where we have double lectures. So it would be the Monday 19th and then the Wednesday 21st. So please make note of that. That's a bit of an exception here. And the final lectures is on the 4th of June. Then quickly, how to pass. Aalto students, FITEC students, you will get the credits. So you need to attend all the lectures. If you miss a lecture, contact facilitating at Aalto and we will tell you what you have to do. And then you have to do all the exercises. Simple as that. Practicalities, there's going to be an attendance form somewhere later in this lecture where you need to mark down your attendance so we know who was at this lecture. Fixed pairs are possible, and we got a lot of emails for you FITEC people, professionals pairing up. Exercises, like we said, you have to do all the pair exercises to pass the course. We will assign a random pair every week. There's a bit of a hassle because you're so many people, so it might be that we assign a pair for you, and that pair never answers your emails. But no panic, then just contact facilitating at Aalto, and we will fix that problem. We try to be very flexible and understandable. Don't worry about that. Yeah, there's attendance, like I think that mentioned already. The Google form becomes important. How to listen to these lectures, they're going to be more or less like this. Me or Jari talking, a lot of pictures, not that many texts. So if you want to go out and walk the dog, do it. That's the best way for you to listen, do it. But we're going to have breakout rooms, one is coming up pretty soon, where we're hoping that you are there and open your camera. And then in the small breakout room, you will talk with the other people. So that's what we call the in-class exercises. And we're trying to give you the schedules before time, so you can know kind of when to be next to a camera and when you can maybe do, empty the dishwasher or something while you listen to these. Here's a recipe for success in this course. If you miss a lecture, email us. If you can't contact your pair for the week exercise, email us. If you are there and you have received 0 emails at this time, then email us, because then we have maybe a wrong email address for you or something else. So let's fix that as well. Good. Here's the lecture today. We're going to have a break somewhere about 5:05 finish time. That would be in half an hour. And but anyway, just a few things. House rules. Remember, when you meet each other in the breakout rooms or the exercises, and I'm sure this applies to all of you, be open-minded, respect the diversity we have, for example, the international audience. Strive to acknowledge unconscious biases, challenge your own assumptions as well. And I'm sure you're all here to learn, so you're automatically open to new perspectives. And listen to the other person. Take the opportunity to learn. How do they see these same topics in their world? speak with care and respect, be compassionate. And if you have any problems, Jari and myself are there to help you. And these are our university's safer space principles.
And
but let's now go for a breakout room. Just figure out who are you.
I would
Yeah,
like
Jari.
to really encourage you to participate to these breakout rooms. Don't shy away when there's breakout. Take a risk and meet others, because this is one of the really fruitful things on this course, that you can meet diverse people who are interested in the same thing and share something about you. It's not just listening others, but it's also sharing your own views, being available. So we really encourage you to take the risk and join the breakout rooms.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a risk, but
Yeah. I mean,
I get the feeling.
risk to meet.
I know. I think it's absolutely right. Thanks, Jari, for saying that. So that's what we're actually do. So rather than opening 137 cameras at the same time, so Annika is going to transform you into a breakout room of about 5 people. So just simply one at a time, tell who you are, why you took this course, where you come from. And we're going to give you about 10 minutes altogether, so there's no hurry. And then, just to make it more collective, choose a note taker that one of you in that group will maybe put some bullet points. Who were you? First names, no need to list last names. Why are you here? What kind of different motivations or diverse interests people have? And put it into the chat once you get back from the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
If it's totally impossible for you to join a breakout room, then you just don't join. But remember Jari's words.
Yeah. So thanks for coming back, and let's continue now. And at this stage, we also want to take this kind of step back in a way when we are now dealing with organizations or organizations in chains, and then it's utmost important that we are aware of those lenses which we are using when we are looking to organizational and social reality. And why that is important is that we are really getting information through experiences, perceptions, speech, pictures, emotions, interactions from our surroundings and organization. And we make sense out of that quite continuously and intuitively, and also in a conscious way. But one thing is that we really interpret, or our mind interpret all the data, make sense out of that. And I would claim that we all have unique lenses to interpret and make sense out of the data we acquire. And that's something that we easily forget, that we take it so self-evidently. If I now interpret the data in a way, then I have quite easily, I presume, that others also interpret the data in the same way. But that I would argue that there's always differences. And why is that? So our lenses, so our apparatus in our head, or well, of course, it's bodily senses as well, but how we have built our lenses throughout our life history. And of course, we might have differing worldview, view of reality in a way, view of human nature, how trustworthy people are, or how let's say suspicious I should be about other people. Our personalities differ, so that might also make impact how we interpret other people and social reality. Then we all have certain values, and I would also claim that or argue that we have ideologies, that we have certain belief systems, that how the world should be, what's right, what's wrong, and that also influences and labels our interpretation, what's happening. And they can really differ quite a bit from person to person. Also our educational background, professional background, and frames tend to label our interpretations, like engineers or economists or lawyers or psychologists or humanists tend to see different things in the same stuff than others. Then our cultural and social experiences and background, so our upbringing and that will frame our lenses. But then there's also and many of these things are quite stable in a way and very implicit, and that's why it would be very good to become more aware of your own lenses. But it's also very contextual in a way that in different social contexts we might let's say laugh at jokes that we don't laugh in other context, or some situational factors can label our interpretations quite a bit as well. And then our personal vitality and alertness as well, that when we are more tired or when we are with fresh mind, that also labels our interpretations. And then, as I said already, that's, are we still prone to presume that others perceive and experience the world and situations similarly with us? So I think it would be good to remember that others will see somewhat differently, and should we be more willing to ask and listen how others are perceiving and interpreting? So more asking, how did you see this? Because then we can really learn about others, but we can also enrich our mutual interpretation, what's happening and why it's happening, what's important, what's not so important, and that we don't do enough, to be honest. So, and when we are talking about the change situation, that's even more important, because there's a lot of emotional stuff involved and this kind of uncertainties and so forth. So one thing is also, when we ask people to are curious about how others perceive, then we engage others also to make sense out of the situation, and that's of course one of the issues that we ask you to now exercise or train when having these intermediate weekly exercises, where you are really facilitating the other to make sense out of their own situation, and there we have opportunity to really exercise listening. But if you don't have any concept or theory, the data doesn't make sense to us. So our mind, we should have some kind of concept in our mind that we can compare to the data we're getting, and use that concept to interpret the data. And here, well, someone could see it as some black and white patterns. But if you have a concept of a dog or a Dalmatian, then you can see the dog there. But if you don't have a concept of dog, then this just doesn't make much sense. So in same information, the same data set, the persons who are more experienced can interpret much richer picture than when we are more novice as well. And so that's also one of our, when we learn to become more professional, then we can see a richer picture from the data. Okay, then how about organizations? What is our concept or theory of an organization or organizational reality? Because we all have some kind of theory, and some of us have quite rich views and understanding, and maybe some of us still have a little bit narrow or not so rich concept of organization. And I think it's good to now really reflect on what's my understanding. How do I look at the organizational reality? But then other issue is that what would be the useful ways to understand the organization and organizational reality? How we can acquire knowledge? What's a valid knowledge? How to make sense out of that, and how to make sense together? And then how do we see it, or how do we can then get knowledge out of the organizational reality? So one thing I would argue that we have quite if we have this kind of engineering mindset. Well, sorry, being engineer, so I'm referring pretty much that. There is tendency maybe to take that we can objectively measure, analyze, and understand the organization from outside. That we acquire some knowledge, measure something, and then we make sense out of that and analyze and make a slide deck. And that's something that, and that might be valid. But is it enough? Or should we also see organization more as a social construction, that the reality is continuously socially constructed and maintained through mutual meaning making within, so that it's not just outside, but it's within. And I would argue that this is in many cases much more fruitful thinking, that we as a change agents, we are not outside, we are within, and we are a part of the system as well. And so that's let's say enriching way to see the reality. And of course, there some this kind of more neutral analysis data is also utilized, and maybe the combination is good way. And having this kind of multiple perspectives, able to see, understanding or being able to acquire knowledge and analyze knowledge from in a different perspectives is fruitful way to do. But then I think it's pretty much through experience, and this kind of experientiality is important when we trying to understand the organization reality, what's happening, that we are really doing something, and then we make sense out of that doing. That okay, we try something, and and then we make sense and reflect on that experience, and through that we can really learn, acquire new knowledge about the social organizational reality, and that way we can also create some new understanding together. And I would say that's one very core aspect of a change work in organizations, that people really experience something, try something new, and then we make sense, and then we learn, and then we repeat. Another aspect is that all organizations, so the organizational knowledge is very local, and this contextuality is one key. So each organization context are unique, and that's why it's we can apply general principles and general knowledge, but then we have to apply it in a way that what happens in this particular context, because they are all unique. And it's also taking into account this contextuality is very respectful for people creating the organization. And how contextuality is then manifested is that we have local language and meanings. That all of those of you who have been working in different organizations have noticed, most likely, that there is same words are meaning different things in different organizations. It can even happen between the teams or between the functions in the same organization, that we really create local meanings and local language. And then the organizational reality is built between people. So it's very, very relational, as we were already talking about this leadership, that leadership happens, but it's also the meaning making, and this it's very interactional, and we are all partakers. So there is this kind of reciprocal mechanisms which are fruitful and not just one way communication. And then processuality, which I mean that things are happening all the time, and there is history we have legacy, we have history in most organizations, and which we have to take into account. We have a present moment, but then we have also kind of aspects for the future, what we want, what our aspirations are, and where we're heading. And this processuality is also that people interact, they do stuff, they produce value, they solve problems, and that way they interact, and they relationships evolve, and we produce stuff. whether it's that we produce new knowledge, we produce something tangible, products, or we provide services. So that's and this processuality is that it's always in motion in a way. That's why its change is not, there's not static kind of stage of organization, but there's this kind of movement all the time. And then it's highly, let's say, routinized. We build practices. We keep meetings. We have a communication practices. We have certain ways of doing stuff, and they tend to become very routinized. And that's of course make us, let's say, good practice make us more efficient. But they tend to also then keep us, when we routinize things together, then it takes, when we want to change things, then we have to create new routines, and that's not just saying that this is now wise way, but it's really through experience we can then create new practices, new routines, but that takes some time. And the good culture finally, which is somehow labeling that how we are, what our belief system, how we what's important, what's our deeper assumptions and beliefs, that how we are good organization, and what's important, and what's allowed, not what's not allowed. And also these cultural beliefs and values really stick us together and are kind of glue within the organization. But it's also when the culture is something that is labeling that it's very kind of existential issue, that's why it's also hindering us to change sometimes. But through experiences and through meaning making, we can really do that. But it's not just this overnight kind of thing. And then the culture and practices, they tend to, as I said, there's a history. So we have certain beliefs already. When we enter the organization, we tend to socialize ourselves to culture and practices, that what's the right way to be in this organization. And that way we also can say that the culture, we reproduce the culture all the time when we are repeating our beliefs and practices. And at the same time, so we are kind of, that's helping us to do the right thing, but then it's also hard to do the change. But I think it's possible that we start doing things differently, that we also then change the culture. But there is this kind of recursive nature of culture in our everyday life. And finally, some further questions. And as I say, that I think it's very healthy, whatever we do as a leader or agent in an organization, that we get to know our own ways of seeing how do I see the world, the organization, reality, which frame our agency and understanding. So are we reflecting on our relentlessness and basic assumptions critically enough is a good question. Then can we let us experience, explore, and exercise new practice in a safe and useful way? So because our practice and cultural beliefs are strongly routinized and part of our identities, so that we can step outside our comfort zones, and that's also part of that we are willing to explore and pilot new stuff. And then I'd also say that we are more relational and interdependent beings than we believe in life in general, but also in organizations. So, and that's the issues like inclusion, participation, need of competency, that people feel that when we are doing change, that people are having adequate feeling of that they are competent of doing new stuff, that we take that seriously in general, but especially in a change situation. This was a very quick skim through some of the very basic stuff of our being in a social world, interpreting but when we are agents, it's really I think it's this kind of let's say moral or ethical imperative for us to become more aware of and take a critical view of our own lenses and belief systems and this kind of basic interpretations. And then we have more possibility to ask how others are seeing stuff. But now it's time our break, right?
Time for a break. Don't
Yeah.
read emails. Go on, do something else for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I was kind of just thinking that if you're like 10 seconds late, then I'll do something for 10, 15 seconds. Anyway, that's done now. So the next thing, kind of the second part of this lecture, I'm going to give you kind of our take on what are the root causes for the changes. Why are so organizations, why do they need to change? Why is there this drive to change? And I was quickly looking over all the comments in the chat as well, and there's so many. Change is such a good word because it can embraces so many things. It can be change on individual level, organizational level, or societal level. But kind of, I'm hoping now, and I'm sure all of the things I'm going to tell you now are more or less obvious. So it's kind of like bringing us all on the same page, that what is the underlying pressure for organizations to change? And maybe kind of the sad thing about, because I've been using these slides for quite a while, and this uncertainty just seems to be more and more relevant. The fog, the metaphorical fog in the picture seems to get thicker and thicker. And if you thought that uncertainty is something to deal with last year, well, now it looks like there's even more uncertainty with a shorter time period. But something like this, we have been, let's say, 10, 15 years, we have known that these things are kind of pressuring organizations to change. The traditional management principles don't seem to work anymore, or customer expectations are growing, and legacy structures are hindering process, and there's new enabling technologies. And in addition to all of this, we have all these technological changes coming up, and regulational changes and tariffs nowadays, and all of these things are just that if we have these things I have in black, which are kind of big fundamental things about running an organization, then we have all of these small things or big things just popping up, and we need to somehow, organizations need to deal with these things. So that's kind of what's adding into the fog, and we can't see the road ahead anymore. As a metaphor for, hey, that we had this 5-year plan or a 5-year strategy, but now we need to somehow change the organization, the way that we work. And uncertainty has become, everyday thing. It's not like bad weather that let's just wait for the fog to go away. It looks like, as organizations, we are in the fog for the next decade or two. And there was even fog, we all remember COVID-19 already 5-6 years ago, when suddenly there was definitely organizations didn't really know what happens. And then all the energy crisis, the economic crisis after the pandemic, then the kind of the global politics nowadays are causing more and more uncertainties to organizations, whether they're businesses, public sector organizations, or whatever they are. They need to deal with driving or working in the fog or driving into the fog. So in all simplicity, the question, of course, is how do you lead? How do you lead into the fog? As a change leader, what kind of organizations would you like to build? What do you do as a leader? And a couple of the, the usual suspects that I had over there, just go over them one by one quickly, is that traditional management principles don't longer work. And I was told once by a more senior board member of a large company saying that, hey, Risto, you got to remember that most of the board members took their MBAs or their business studies in late 80s, early 90s. And things have changed from that quite a lot. So kind of the fundamental years when they learn about running an organizations are actually quite old. And some of those principles that they were on don't work anymore. And the one I really highlight is that for, let's say, I'm cutting corners here, but for the most 100 years, the whole 20th century, the whole management philosophy was all about predictability, meaning that I was trying to manage my team so that they can give me numbers, that I can give my numbers to my boss, and that boss can give to the next boss, who can give it to the board of directors, who can give it, in a public press release if we're a publicly listed company, for example. And we're kind of, or the whole organization was rigged for predictability, for producing those numbers and so forth. And the causality between the decisions for organizations was relatively stable, relatively certain, not as fast as nowadays. And we had organizations like this, kind of organizations with clear functions. This is IBM from 1930s. Kind of clear functions, clear roles, clear hierarchies, and kind of try to make sense of the organizational reality, as Jari was talking, by making it kind of this taxonomy of how we work. But of course, nowadays we understand that if we're really carving this kind of a structure into stone, or maybe you are working for an organization that is a century old, you can see that working sideways, horizontally, becomes very difficult here. And dealing with the uncertainty, dealing with creativeness, innovation typically requires for people to collaborate more horizontally. And that's where we get phrases like, let's burn down the silos, the silos are hindering our progress. It is really, in all simplicity, this kind of traditional model of organizing for predictability. Then the other thing is kind of obvious. It's the new emerging technologies. Things are coming at such a speed. And it's, again, especially for large organizations, it takes quite a while from them to adopt the technology. And it might be that once it is more or less adopted, it's already, old news. There's a new version, there's a new technology that's coming to replace it. And this is, of course, has pushed companies in the past for this speed for innovation, speed for time to market. And this has been actually, I would say, a response to some of these problems. Because if you think about an organization, it's kind of like their front is the services and the products that the organization creates to the customers. And the faster you can change the front, the products and the services, the faster you can adapt to the changes in the uncertain market or the uncertain world. And that puts a lot of pressure on fast innovation and rapid innovation and agile product development and so forth. And it kind of feels like this, maybe, if you're in a leadership position, and even if you're an expert, maybe doing product development, it becomes this whack-a-mole game, that this uncertainty is getting thicker. There's more and more things that you need to start reacting. There's more fires to put out. And you might find yourself, I don't know, if that's a picture of you, you can comment in the chat, playing the whack-a-mole game, which is kind of a sad metaphor, because what's the sad thing about whack-a-mole? Anybody in the chat? Not yet, at least. You can't win. That's the problem with whack-a-mole, is it? It just gets faster and faster and faster, and you will always lose. Yeah. So I don't know if that's your psychological mindset in trying to deal with uncertainties, but I would say that for a lot of organizations, it is actually. And we all went through this when the pandemic hit globally, that we saw that some organizations were really good and really fast in adapting when they had no idea what's in front of them. Or maybe you can go back to your own work and look at maybe your own team and think that, hey, we were actually really good at that thing, the way we worked, or maybe there was a process we adapted, or maybe there was for example, the speed that people took on online meetings was really a good thing. There was kind of positive things on how we actually, as an organization, we were really agile. We were really fast in adapting. And maybe some of you have kept some of those ways of working and practicalities from the pandemic. That's a good point, that the moles are probably sad too in the whack-a-mole game. They get hit a lot. And then, of course, we have the legacy structures everybody loves to blame, especially in a large organization. And kind of what's slowing down large, big, old organizations? And yeah, Jari, wait a sec. Okay, Jari, go ahead. Why not?
Yes, I'm just thinking, are you showing the slides, or because they are not visible here?
Are they not? That is a problem.
Sorry to interrupt.
We can see the slides.
I can see
Yeah,
the
you-
Risto.
All right, yes.
we can see the
It's my
slides.
problem. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, go on.
But Jari, you're an important
I can't
person.
use Zoom anymore.
We need to get you to see the slides.
Yeah, I have to. Sorry.
Okay, but if everybody else is there,
Great,
sorry. We need to go for the masses. But thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah, it's Risto's screen.
Anyway, here's a typical list of what's slowing down big old organizations. And I'm sure you, again, many of you kind of start nodding your head. Maybe there are physical assets. Maybe you're a railroad company and there's like 10,000 kilometers of rail on the ground. You just can't, one morning decide that you are a purely digital company or something similar. Maybe the chain of command is very, rigid, or maybe things are still good. Why change? We're profitable, we're doing everything is fine. Why change? But also with this quick list I put here, kind of want to show that maybe some of these things, legacy structures, are not that bad, like laws and regulations. Yeah, from one perspective, it might be that they're hindering progress. But I mean, if we look at the history of social media, I think it might have been good that there were some more laws and regulations in hindsight. Or let's say like a banking domain. I think we as citizens or consumers, I think we're quite happy that banks have certain regulations in place hindering their progress, if you will. So again, yes, we tend to be very kind of, how should I say, blaming the legacy structures, but you need to kind of have a pinch of salt with them and see that why are they? What is their purpose and why are they slowing down? And then the next one is those freaking customers, because they keep on changing as well. I mean, even if your organization managed to stay afloat and succeed in the fog, it's the customers living the same planet. So they are changing all the time as well. You can think positively, they have the same problems as you do. So why not, start sharing how to solve them? But the customers are dynamic and changing as well. And their expectations. So my example is from the university world. So in the left-hand side is our university's official ERP system, the system where, students book their courses and everything, which is, to put it mildly, slightly clunky. And, it's better than it used to be a couple of years ago, but still, because we live on this planet where you can just literally take your smartphone and with 2 clicks order food from your favorite restaurant delivered on your front door. That's actually a very complex thing to be solved. Registering to courses, I don't think it's that complex. But my point being is that we have this kind of mismatch, that maybe your customers at your work are like, hey, why is this ERP like this, When I go home, Netflix just knows already what I want. Why doesn't your ERP know already what I want? And I'm sure that a lot of companies are trying to solve this as well. But then, of course, the biggest pressure to change is the fact that the whole current way of doing business, let's put it that way, is not literally sustainable, because it is built on continuous growth and we are running out of resources in this planet. And, we are eating up some of the things that keep this planet healthy. So there is a lot of talk and people feel that there's the whole rationale and purpose of businesses and organizations has to change. Because I think fundamentally the whole business philosophy and how we build organizations is assuming constant growth. And if that's not possible anymore, then that's a fundamental change in how we organize. But one more. Here's a kind of again, very clunky cutty corners example, because I think this is really in the business world globally. When I train and educate and talk with, global companies and the managers and leaders there, it is kind of my summary of what's the big changes happening, kind of looking back in the past 2 decades. Is because I think we are, as organizations, we are on this trajectory from a more product-centric philosophy of leadership or organizations towards this more impactful, let's say, globally sustainable organizations. And what do I mean by this? So here's in my clunky example, we have, let's say, a company that's making these blenders, the stuff where you put your fruit in and then you buzz a button and then you have a smoothie. That's a blender. And it has a product, and the product has a user, and it uses the product, something like that. And then nowadays, or let's say in the past 20 years, a lot of product manufacturing businesses have been thinking and talking about how could we be more valuable to our customers. And there's been a lot of talk about what's the customer experience. So it's not just that, people buy a gadget or a product and use it. It's kind of like, what's their experience? How does it fit into their lives and all of this? And, here in Europe, we've had service designing services that, integrate all of this and understand the larger context. And then, of course, the next question that has popped up, obviously, is that if traditional manufacturing philosophy has turned more into service business philosophy, then that's putting a lot of pressure on the organizations because you cannot really run a service business as a product business. And this is, of course, true if you're not even a business, if you're a public sector company, because we, at least here in the Nordics, I can say we see the same. That, let's say, for example, cities and municipalities are thinking more in ways of services for the citizens. And they have not traditionally been service companies, and things are bursting at the seams. So more and more there's talking about customer relationships, so kind of the path underneath that, from the individual product to the customer experience, more not like what's the relationship between us and the customers, what's the brand, Cities have brands now, and citizens, subscribe to those brands, and it becomes like a relationship rather than actually just buying a product. So that's a huge change as well in the organizations. And then last but not least is this big challenge we're facing. A lot of pressure in companies for trying to answer the question, are they honestly positive impact for the society, or for the environment or the society in general, and especially here in Europe and especially here in Nordics. And those of you who come outside Europe probably have different views on this, and that's how it is. So, for example, when I do trainings with South Korean business people, then they're kind of like, yeah, we know that this is a big thing in Europe, but in South Korea, it's not necessarily so big yet, I hope. But this kind of slide showing the whole kind of trajectory of how do you go from that traditionally organizations have been, the philosophies and leadership has based on manufacturing, and then growing towards more services, and now growing towards more of these like relationships and branding, and now more and more thinking about how do we organize ourselves to create a positive impact on society. And I would say that this is one huge change that touches every organization on this planet. And if you think about your employer, if you're working for a company now, it's kind of like, okay, where are you more or less in this trajectory? Are you still a manufacturing company that's trying to figure out how to do services? Or are you a service company trying to figure out that how do you build long-standing customer relationships? Or are you really focusing on the societal impact aspects? But that's kind of the point, that's where the fog comes. That's my thesis for you, that these things in the black are there fundamentally putting a lot of pressure for change for companies. And I think it's really important to have an understanding that these are big trends. Typically in change leadership, we kind of see the immediate operational changes and small things we can change, which is great. But I think it's really good to understand that some of things are really fundamental large trends, which is another way of saying, even if you switch your employer, they will have the same problems. So maybe hold on to your job. Help wanted. Especially now with a lot of changes, AIs, economic, geopolitical changes, we could have added into that. Anyway, give you a little piece of hope. Is this all new under the sun? No, it isn't. Businesses and strategies and organizations under uncertainty has been studied for decades. And we'll get back to this later in this course and kind of Typically, I use some articles from the 1980s. 1980s, oh God, that's like Stone Age, that deal with the same problems we have now in 2025. And I think that actually gives a lot of hope that, hey, maybe going back to what Jari, you were talking about, these are actually human problems that we're dealing with in organizations. And we have actually a lot of experience dealing with human problems. These are not technological problems, or these are not somehow strange organization problems. Organizations are humans put together. So, we do have ways of dealing with these things. And kind of my next point is that, of course, like I said, if there's my broad picture of driving into the fog is something that's been there for 20 years. Let's say 20 years ago, started talking about digitalization. It will change everything. And a lot of organizations were in the fog because they didn't know how to digitalize their businesses. For example, take newspapers or what else? Television. Media companies are an example because they were in the very front of digitalization. But to turn that again into a positive thing, there's a lot of awakenings in the business world of how to actually deal with this, what to do when change is imminent. And the awakening number one, I'm going to list here, is that by now, in the year 2025, I think it should be obvious to everybody that digital technology is not a technology thing, actually. The digital is not about technology, that making things digital is about ways of working. And I mean this. So all of this stuff in the left-hand side, software, artificial intelligence, whole, IT, by now we know that when we introduce this technology, what we're actually changing is how we work, the ways of working. To put it another way, and if we would have asked any social scientist back already in 1970s, they would have told us that technology has never been about technology. Technology has always been about human behavior. So for us all engineers here, the fact is that engineering and technology is the most human thing on this planet. Because actually it boils down to human thinking and behavior at the end of the day. And that's what I'm trying to convince you with this slide. Technology is about actions. It's about behavior, practices. And take an organizational context, the place you work with, or maybe for you students where you study, if you look at the technology you're using, it's actually shaping the way you do things, the ways of working, the routines and habits, the doing concrete stuff. So then maybe as a fun side note to keep you awake, anybody ready for the chat? What single technology in the 19th century radically changed the European gene pool? Anybody? Hey, well done. Smart people. Maija, Ville, Laura, there you go. It is the bicycle. Because I try to make a point with this rather than just being a bike person and having mentioning bicycles here. There's a point here. Wait. First of all, the bicycle was very influential in the late 19th century because A, it was affordable. So sometimes people say it was the railroad. Yes, railroad was a lot of, changes about travel and distance, but not everybody could still travel on the railroad. But bicycle was very affordable. So it meant that a lot of people had access to a bicycle. And all of us who do a lot of bicycling or cycling know that it just expands our ranges. And then we can meet more people, and there we get to the gene pool. However, the point I'm kind of making here is that understanding these kind of causalities, if you will, is actually very difficult. Like just a few minutes ago, I was talking about societal impact of organizations and technologies. Sure, we should think about them. But for example, I don't think that any of the bicycle engineers, none of the bicycle business people in late 19th century started by going, hey, let's go and change the gene pool a little bit. No, they were just doing technology and doing business with that technology. But again, I don't think the world was it such that they were thinking about societal impacts. I'm sure there were a lot of people thinking about that. But the other point about the bicycle is that it wasn't about the technology, it wasn't about the bicycle technology as such, but it's how it changed our behavior, our way of doing, and gradually way of thinking as well. So I had to add the bicycle slide. Point being, technology is about way of working. And if you introduce new technology, you will introduce new way of working. And if you transform your business into digital, you are transforming the company culture. And the bigger the technological transformation, the bigger the culture change. So all of us here who are driving for technological change should be very conscious that we're actually driving for cultural change in the organization. And look how cleverly in the word transformation, I left the letters A and I in white, because the whole artificial intelligence transformation, by now we should all know that this is a huge organization culture transformation. It's not a technology transformation, it's a culture transformation, period. Awakening number 2. Somehow there's been, in the past, again, 10 years or something, that realized that it's not enough just to tweak here or there in the organization, that somehow this organization change is a big thing, that we need to change the whole culture. And the word culture has become very relevant in the discussions. And there seems to be a lot of, in these discussions, we have this old culture where we have top-down control and, rigid structures and, ghost of Taylorism there haunting around. And we need to get away from this kind of thinking. Kind of like I said, old man Taylor over 100 years ago, thinking that organizations, they are like these scientific machines and we just need to have this taxonomy of function and this bureaucracy of rules. And, it's all about top-down control leadership. The leader is a rational observer. The leader is not part of the organization, but it's kind of an outsider doing leadership. These are all very kind of embedded thinking in organizations in the 20th century. But these are not necessarily true. And I'm sure many of you have this kind of like, well, there is this new culture in the horizon that we can do things differently, that we can have a new kind of company culture. And it's definitely brought by software and software culture, because software engineering and programming and code has kind of gradually sneaked into all different businesses and domains. And in this, whatever you call it, lean culture, responsive culture, agile culture, has certain very different principles. So it's all about grassroots taking responsibilities and grassroots experts making decisions. And if they make good decisions, they need to have transparency of information. They need to be able to access information as much as possible. And then the fourth one, that the processes are not sacred anymore. It's more about focusing on the end result. We need to get this number up, or we need to get this and this many new customers. And there's much more freedom for creativity, for innovation of how do we get there. And then last but not definitely least is that, okay, this is actually putting a lot of stress on the individual. This is putting a lot of stress on the experts, because you're practically asking the experts to figure out what to do and then do it. That's kind of a double job, to say the least. But that was awakening number 2, that there's somehow this huge cultural change we're going to do. Awakening number 3, how do we do the cultural change? We need to change somehow by doing. And now you can kind of say it kind of resonates back to the awakening number 1, doesn't it? It's not enough just to show PowerPoints and say, this is the new company culture, bye-bye. But somehow we need to go there and change how people do things. Which brings us back to the well-known business history of 1970s Toyota car manufacturing. And a long story short, of course, in the 1980s, American car manufacturers were concerned because Japanese cars were less expensive and of better quality. So they were doing something differently. And they started figuring out how do they organize their car production. And one of the great stories, and there's a reference to this podcast at the end of the lecture, is Mr. John Shook, who they sent to Japan, to Toyota factories to figure out And he learned many things. And the thing I'm picking from his lessons learned is this, that if the old model of changing organization culture was that, the board members get together and decide that this is the culture, and then they decide these are the values and attitudes, courage, innovation, togetherness, and then they tell people what to do. But the whole Toyota philosophy, if you're familiar with that, you know this quite well, was that no, let's go to the factory floor. Let's empower the individual workers within their own kind of sphere where they can change their routines and practicalities and all of these. Let them kind of have a good conversation and discuss how could this be done better. And in addition to that, the Toyota philosophy had this kind of experimentation and constant learning, that they were encouraging people, okay, if you think this is a better way, let's try that for a couple of days and see if it was good. And if it wasn't, let's go back to the previous. And if it was good, hey, let's change how you do these things. So literally, they went to the factory floor and started together with the people discussing that how could we do this better? And of course, the leadership had the responsibility of setting the kind of the big lines. What are we trying to do? More efficient or, more customer centric. But then kind of letting the grassroots change the way they do things. And that's how you build a culture. But then, this kind of get these embedded attitudes, values, and then the kind of culture kind of grows from the bottom up. So just like I highlight here, change people's behavior first, and that will change thinking rather than the other way around. So this works really nicely in the past decade with all the uncertainty from digitalization, from the pandemic and AI and now geopolitics. Uncertainty, of course, it means that you can't really plan it. The world is too uncertain. So to answer the whack-a-mole game, you start building this responsive culture. That what if we had this company culture that kind of can already respond to these constant changes without overhauling the organization all the time? Culture, what do you mean by culture? Culture of doing. And what Mr. Shook taught us, doing is all about routines and tools. Routines and tools. Now, if you have thought, why is design thinking being so popular in the past 20 years? Why things like lean startup have been so popular? Agile philosophies, why are they so popular even outside software engineering? It's because they are routines and tools. They're actually agnostic about whether you are building ships or, creating ice cream for kids. They still work in whatever domain or whatever context. And that's why we have this myriad of ways, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with business model canvases, the lean startup or lean canvas, and all of these tools and frameworks, because they are actually how you change the culture. So if I put it into one picture, the whole philosophy that companies have learned in the past decade about change goes something like this. So if in the upper left-hand corner, we have the uncertainty, and in the right-hand corner, we want to be, competitive in that uncertainty. We want to succeed in that uncertainty. So the idea is that, okay, to tackle uncertainty, we need to build a responsive organization culture. Something that kind of almost automatically reacts to changes. Culture, what do you mean culture? Well, culture of doing things. What do you mean doing? Doing is all about routines, tools, and practices. And that's why we have been, overwhelmed. Well, I don't know about you, but typically companies have really got excited in the past decades about routines such as weeklies and dailies and, certain tools like, business model canvases or OKRs are very fashionable at the moment. Or maybe simple rules of making decisions. Holding retrospectives every week or once a month. These are all kind of, you can see, these are tools and routines and practices that, again, they're totally agnostic on what you actually do. But now you can see the right side of this picture, which is that, okay, when people start using these kind of atomic, small structures, and they use them, let's say, for weeks or even for months, you're getting shared behavior, you're getting shared action, you're getting a little bit of tangibility on these abstract matters. And just like John Schucht said, that, okay, when you change behavior, then gradually you're changing people's thinking. People are sharing thinking, sharing values, sharing meanings. They have collective experiences. And ta-da, if you persist as an organization, you are forming a new, more autonomous, responsive, shared culture. And it seems that this is the key for success in uncertainty. Autonomous, responsive, shared culture. And to do the change, it is kind of like you could start the change very small. It doesn't require a huge overhaul. But the whole this change management becomes, in a way, just introducing strategically like these acupuncture changes in people's everyday work. And if you were wondering why we have a lot of canvases and routines to address uncertainty, that's the point. Because to put it bluntly, that seems to be the answer. With these atomic small organizational structures, you can kind of change the wings of an airplane in mid-flight.
Can I
Another way of saying, yeah, Jari, go ahead.
say a little bit add on here, because it's really a doing stuff, get experiences, but then talk about that, make mutual meanings. How was it? What does it mean? And creating a new language and make new meanings through those doings. And so that creates our new culture, that we really talk about that as well and give meanings to stuff and create a new way of talking and relating as well.
Absolutely. So it's gonna, to put it another way, of course, it's not enough that you just introduce a business model canvas and magic happens, but somebody needs to facilitate the dialogues, the conversations, the adoption, the adapting of these tools into the particular context of a team, of an organization, and so forth. Absolutely. And this is another way of saying that we believe that that's why action are doing are the key to tackling uncertainty. Again, remember, we started, book knowledge, great, but we need to do things. In the words of Elvis Presley, little more action and a little less conversation. So you need to get your hands dirty. And just like I put the John Schucht model here, it's, changing culture starts by getting your hands dirty and doing things differently. Good. Hey, it's time for the first exercise of the week. As maybe some of you have been looking at the clock, we are running out of time. So actually, the first exercise for you all FITEX and degree students is this. For all the tourists, hey, do it for fun. Grab a colleague, do it. It's an easy exercise. Money back guarantee if you don't like it. So what we're asking you to do is to draw and understand the big picture of your pair. So we're going to pair you up, and the other person is going to tell you a couple of things. I'm going to give you an example, and you need to kind of try to understand their organizational context. And now you can kind of see what I implied in the beginning, that there's a lot of listening and understanding other people involved. Deadline by the end of Monday. So Tuesday, I have time to look at your exercises, and then on Wednesday, we have the lecture again. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Oops. Because the point being that, it's called a context onion. Now you can see the visualization. It's kind of like an onion. Because working in uncertainty is all about understanding the context. You need to be able to step back and see the larger context where you work in. So, it can be like the onion. It goes all the way back to the outside world. Outside world, your company. How do we organize within the company? How do we do our work? And what does our team actually do? So whatever you're doing, there's always a larger context. Duh. But maybe it's not that obvious and implicit. As there's you as an individual, you're part of a team, your team is part of an organizational unit, the organizational unit is part of a company, the company is part of a domain or part of a market, and so forth and so forth. Which means that if you want to be successful, it's actually always defined from the outer layer of the onion, from the outside. Whether you're a successful worker is pretty much decided outside in the team context. Are you a team player? Did you do your job? Is your team successful? That's kind of decided within the organizational unit. So you better understand the larger context if you want to understand what success is. And of course, the other thing is that the impact happens. You do your work, the impact happens on the team level. Your team does the work, the impact happens on the organizational level, and so forth and so forth. So here's a quick example. Let's say that we want to introduce design thinking into a workplace. So there's a UX designer working at this organization, and they go like, hey, I want to learn design thinking. And you are the facilitator. And you'll go, sure, I will coach you. What is? And then the UX designer learns tools and thinking and skills and all that. And then after a month, the designer goes like, oh my God, I understand design thinking, but nobody in my team understands it. So can you please now coach the whole team to understand what is design all about? Sure, you'll coach all the team. And then the team learns the tools and the thinking and the skills. And then after a month, the UX designer comes back and goes like, it's not enough that the team understands because our business unit director doesn't get it. And our whole governance model and decision-making models don't really support design thinking. So can you coach all the teams and all the directors? Sure, you'll coach them all. So the teams, the directors, the PMO learns all the tools, thinking, and skills. And then maybe the next level, you can see where this is leading. Like, it's all fine, but our whole company strategy and, the top executives, they don't really get it, this way of working and this way of talking. So kind of point being that, hey, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But now you can see that this is implying organizational change. You actually need to be patient and get all those other peoples involved. And just like Jari emphasized in the beginning, organizational reality is a collective social effort. And we talked about leadership being a very social collective effort, which kind of makes it obvious that if you really want to do change, you need to somehow get the people on board as well. And of course, it's a dialogue. It's all about, it's not necessarily you have the answers and you just need to persuade everybody else. It's more like you have an answer. And now when you involve other people, you start the dialogue, and that's how the change happens. And we're going to come back to this later on this course, that how you actually do the facilitation in one way. And then you can see kind of different roles for a facilitator. Typical labels of facilitator, you can be a mentor to somebody. That's maybe like facilitating an individual person. You can be a facilitator or a coach. So maybe that's a team level change agent. Or, there are people whose business cards say organizational change agent. Then they definitely have a much wider, bigger, ground to work with. Or maybe they are hired as a change leader, chief something officer. And their job is to change the whole company. So like a chief digital officer, for example, like 10 years ago was a popular title for people who were actually doing organizational change. But the hobby horse was digital at that time, so that's why it was a digital officer. Okay, understand the larger context. Here's another way of looking at it. Business, Harvard business professor Theodore Leavitt, long time ago, say that, hey, people don't want to buy quarter-inch drills. I'm just looking, do I have a drill here? So I do have. I'm not sure if this is a drill. Anyway, people don't want to buy this. They want a quarter-inch hole in the wall, which is the same thing, put in a nice way, that you need to understand the context of where does the success and the impact happen. And once you clarify the context, here's the Holy Grail. Maybe once you do this exercise, once you tell the other person about your context, you start making success criteria much more visible and tangible. You make your part to help the larger context. You start engaging others, something I just talked about. And suddenly your work becomes more strategic, maybe more inspirational for other people, more meaningful for others. Maybe it becomes more motivated for you and the others. And then you can, check the boxes. This is impactful. This is doing change because you understand the context much better. So here's the official week number 1 exercise. Draw the context onion of your pair's work. You get the slides, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But just make note, when you get your pair, it is you who are drawing the other person's context. You're not drawing your own context. So we're forcing you to listen to the other. But you can have the dialogue and go like, hey, did I understand this? Is this really, does the onion look familiar to you? And do that. And keep in mind, while you're explaining to the other person your own context, the thing that we are kind of cleverly making you do is that we're forcing you to simplify. We're forcing you to cut corners. We're forcing you to try to understand that for this person, this might be relevant and this isn't relevant. We're going to get back to this next week when we looked, what did you answer? That's it. Don't leave yet. Attendance form. Are we ready with that, Annika?
Just hope that we get well started and you are just eagerly waiting your email to get started with the exercise and looking forward next week as we are having our second lecture. But on my behalf, thanks a lot. I think there's a very good activity in chat as well, very good points. We didn't respond so actively back, but I saw that there's a lot of good sharing, and just keep up doing that in the future as well.
Yeah, a lot of good, and thanks for all the comments. We're going to look at these afterwards. Anyway, still a few minutes to go. If you have any comments, feel free. If you need to go, then you need to go. We will see you next Wednesday. We'll be